still remember him for his uncontrollable rages, his struggles with the barons who obliged him to seal Magna Carta, and for the final humiliation of losing the crown jewels in the wash. Yet, as is shown in this revealing study, John was neither a monster nor a tyrant, nor were his opponents disinterested or purely concerned over the liberty of generations of Englishmen to come. John was indeed a ruthless and unpredictable man. He had inherited the full force of his family's notoriously swift temper, but he was also an intelligent and hard-working ruler who distinguished himself as a general, diplomatist and justiciar. We can now see that John owed his reputation largely to the exaggerated and unreliable reports of monkish chroniclers, who, being churchmen, were ready to blacken the name of this one-time enemy of the church. John fought, like so many of his successors, to assert royal authority not against the rights of his people, but against a group of ruthless magnates who were determined to advance their own interests. Okay, so we're going to go straight to the first chapter. Chapter 1, John Lackland, 1167 to 99. Queen Eleanor, the remarkable and beautiful woman who was the wife of King Henry II of England, known as Plantagenet, once told her youngest son John that her husband's family, the Angevins, were descended from the devil. The tradition was that as an early Count of Anjou, the house to which King Henry II belonged, had been married to Melusine, who was Satan's daughter, a fact which was discovered because she never attended Mass, and when at last she was made to do so, flew out of a high window in the church and disappeared. Thus, the Angevins were known as the Devil's Brood, and brother was destined to fight against brother and son against father. So indeed it happened in John's lifetime. Eleanor was a great heiress. As Duchess of Aquitaine, she had been the feudal ruler of a rich and vast area of France, including Poitou in the north, of which she was countess, and the wine-bearing district of Gascony in the southwest. Henry was her second husband. She had first been married to King Louis VII of France, a strange and deeply pious member of the house of Capet, who took his handsome and brilliant wife with him on the Second Crusade against the Mohammedans of Palestine. Okay, before we continue, this image here is an effigy of Eleanor of Aquitaine on her tomb in Fontainebleau. As Duchess of Aquitaine, she was ruler of almost half of France, south of Loire, and her marriage to Henry II brought these lands into the ownership of the English crown. So, above we have a genealogy of the kings of England from the Chronicle of Matthew Paris. Matthew Paris became historiographer at St Albans in 1235, and he wrote a very unfavourable and lost interest in each other. With some difficulty, the Pope induced them to sleep together, but Eleanor could only produce daughters, so the French king had the marriage annulled. Henry Plantagenet stepped in and snapped up the discarded heiress. He was 19 and she was 30 when they married in 1152. She bore her second husband 5 sons and 3 daughters. John, her youngest child, was born on Christmas Eve 1167, when his mother was 45. Having done her duty and exhausted her charms so far as Henry was concerned, she first left him for her native Poitou, and then was imprisoned for 11 years on the ground that she had conspired with her sons against her husband. Henry II consoled himself with the fair Rosamond Clifford and other mistresses, but Eleanor was to remain a formidable figure long after her second husband was dead. John's father proved himself to be a successful and acquisitive king who ruled over what has been called the Angevin Empire. Which stretched from the southern borders of Scotland to the north of Spain. He inherited England and Normandy through his mother, known as the Empress Matilda, who was the granddaughter of William the Norman, the conqueror of England. From his father, Geoffrey of Anjou, Matilda's second husband, Henry Plantagenet received the fiefs of Anjou, Maine, and Touraine. After the death of his younger brother, he obtained control of the Duchy of Brittany and the county of Nantes. In the course of time, he acquired the border fiefs of the Norman Vexin, Berry, and Auvergne. He was also the overlord of Scotland and Toulouse. Thus, in terms of concrete power, he far outstripped the Capetian kings of France. His feudal overlords, whose own domain covered fewer than 3,000 square miles, about 1/70th of modern France, and was ruled from Paris. Yet when John was born, being Henry II's youngest son, there seemed no prospect of his sharing in this lavish inheritance. At the age of 4, he appears to have been destined not for the state, but for the church. He was given no fief, and his own father called him John Lackland. John was born in Oxford, but before he was a year old, he was placed under the care of an abbey in Anjou. He can never have had much home life, as his father's court wandered from castle to castle throughout his extensive dominions, and his mother was soon separated from him. John seems to have mastered the sports of hunting and tournament play at the court of his eldest surviving brother, Henry, known as the Young King, and his academic education was entrusted to Ranulph de Glanville, a distinguished lawyer who was his father's chief justiciar. An attempt was made to betroth John at the age of 5 to the daughter of an Italian count, but the girl incontinently died. At the age of 9, however, he was betrothed to a wealthy heiress, Isabella, daughter of the Earl of Gloucester. She was his second cousin and also, like him, a great-grandchild of King Henry I. They were married in spite of the Archbishop of Canterbury's indignant protests on account of their kinship, when John was 21, but his pride failed to bear him any children. Even before his wedding, John's prospects had already brightened. It is true that, whereas his father had promised the whole of England and Normandy to the young Henry, Aquitaine to his second son Richard, and Brittany to his third son James, caused his father much anguish, died. Thereupon John, who had now come to be the apple of his father's eye, was offered the duchy of Aquitaine, while Richard was to take over England and Normandy. But Richard, an energetic and capable prince, who was devoted to his mother and to Aquitaine, refused to give it up. John was then invited to become king of Jerusalem, but Henry II wisely turned down this dangerous and dubious proposal, even though John begged on his knees to be allowed to accept it. So instead, Henry consoled John by appointing him Lord of Ireland. Ireland was then a poor country divided uneasily between native chieftains and Norman barons. In 1171, with the full approval of the Pope, Henry II visited Ireland and, without fighting, subjected it to his rule. Though subsequently the island relapsed into anarchy and many Irish chieftains were assassinated, Henry thought it was a good idea to send his favourite son to Ireland to acquire the arts of warfare and government. Before he left in April 1185, John was knighted by his father at Windsor. But John did not distinguish himself in Ireland. The monastic chronicler Gerald of Wales, who accompanied the expedition, wrote that John, being himself young and little more than a boy, followed the counsel of young men, whom he took with him, who were utterly unknown in Ireland and themselves knew nothing, whereas he rebuffed the honest and discreet men whom he found there, who knew the customs and habits of the country, treating them as though they were foreigners and of little worth. Now this image up here is an Irishman killing a fellow countryman. Throughout much of this period, Ireland was in a state of anarchy, as native Irish chieftains and Anglo-Norman settlers warred with one another. That image is from the Bodleian Roll 187 CFR6. John and his young friends were said to have laughed at the shaggy beards of the Irish chieftains. The native Irish defied him, and the Anglo-Normans ignored him. After 8 months, John returned to England a failure, but the blame was not merely due to the inexperience of an irresponsible prince. The armoured knights whom his father had sent with him were unsuited to guerrilla warfare in wooded country and bogland. English soldiers throughout history have found the Irish hard to subdue. In 1186, John's brother Geoffrey of Brittany was killed in a tournament, but left a posthumous son named Arthur to take his title, so once again John was deprived of a profitable inheritance. Richard was also disappointed because his father did not bestow upon him fuller power. Thus, King Philip II of France, who had succeeded his father, Louis VII, in 1180, a statesman of ability, ambition and cunning, was able to stir up trouble between Henry II and his 2 remaining sons. The French king launched an attack on the peripheral territories of the Angevin Empire in Berry, Auvergne and Touraine. When Henry II, fighting desperately to preserve his inheritance, refused to allow his 2 remaining sons to go on the Third Crusade, the kingdom of Jerusalem had fallen to the Mohammedans. Just a note that this terminology is obviously out of date now, but it's a vintage book. necessary to recall some of the features of early medieval society in England. Kings did not necessarily succeed to the throne by primogeniture. They needed to be related in some way to their predecessors, but they had to gain the approval of their leading subjects and might win their crowns by conquest and hold them by military might. Neither Harold II, William I, William II, nor Stephen became King of England simply by hereditary right. Once a king was crowned, he wielded very wide powers in theory, but these were restricted in practice. For example, he had to swear a coronation oath, pledging himself to rule according to the established customs of the land, though there might well be argument over what those customs were. Kings also had to govern with the aid of their tenants-in-chief, both secular and ecclesiastic, important men who attended the great councils in the king's court. If monarchs wished to live peacefully, they had to respect the rights of the church, which had been strengthened by William the Conqueror. The clergy had their own law courts and were not expected to contribute to the royal treasury except of their own free will. Kings did not govern by divine right. The Pope spoke for the Almighty, so the Pope could claim to depose wicked rulers and to give judgment when clergy appealed to him against kings who violated the privileges of the church. The Pope could also demand that kings should serve the cause of God. In fact, English monarchs were not absolute in the sense that they claimed to be after the Reformation. Under the king, the social structure was determined by the use of land in return for services or money payments. In theory, the king owned all the land, which was the principal source of wealth. He could, besides calling upon his barons or tenants-in-chiefs for military service, exact reliefs or succession duties, require aids, payments exacted, for example, for the knighting of his eldest son at the first marriage of his eldest daughter. In an emergency, he could ask for extraordinary aids. He could levy fines and enjoy the profits of wardships. In time of war, the free provision of armed knights could be demanded from tenants-in-chief for a period of 2 months. In time of peace, they might be called up for 40-day service or for the duty of guarding castles. The amount of service was determined by the number of knights enfeoffed by a baron, that is to say, the number of knights who accepted the same obligations to their lord in return for the tenancy of their lands, as their lord performed for the king in return for his. The king, if he preferred, could compound for knight services. The barons would then be called upon to pay a scutage, literally shield tax, for every enfeoffed knight on their books. There were in England some 300 barons and 7,000 knights, out of a total population of 2 million. The scutage was assessed in marks, which were equivalent to 2/3 of the pound sterling, for each knight's fee held by the tenant. The knights and lords of the manor could in turn require services from their tenants, which might be paid in labour or in money or in both. Thus a complicated network of services, rents and customary payments existed, and conflicts of obligation were a main cause of wars, rebellions and social unrest. Greed and ambition prevailed then just as they do now, but the ruling classes could often appeal to he was crowned on the 3rd of September 1189, was to take part in the Third Crusade. This does not seem to have been for religious reasons. In fact, he admired the Saracens and once expressed the view that Pope Clement III was Antichrist, but he loved adventure and war. John, on the other hand, wanted to ensure his own succession to his brother's wide dominions if Richard should be killed on the crusade. Before Richard left England, he created his brother Count of Mortain in Normandy, confirmed him as Lord of Ireland, approved of his acquisition of the lordship or honour of Gloucester, gained by his marriage, which took place on the 29th of August 1189, bestowed on him other fiefs and castles, and assigned to him the entire royal revenues of 6 English counties: Cornwall, Devon, Somerset, Dorset, Derby and Nottingham. That seemed generous enough, but in fact Richard appointed not John, but a Norman upstart, William Longchamp, to take the leading post in the government of England during his absence on the crusade. Longchamp was not only Bishop of Ely, but Chancellor and Papal Legate, and later Justiciar, a veritable poobah. Moreover, Richard summoned John to Normandy and ordered him to stay out of England for 3 years, and as soon as the king reached Sicily on his way to the Holy Land, he sealed the Treaty of Messina, which named Arthur of Brittany, the 4-year-old boy who was his nephew, to succeed him if he should die without issue. Still, John must have had high hopes of the succession. After all, the English monarchy was elective, and even were it hereditary, though Richard married for considerations of state, he was a homosexual, like King William II, and was to have no children. Let's just go back a little bit to this picture. So, this is Crusader Knight doing homage. Richard I earned distinction as a crusading leader, and in 1215 John took the cross, although it is doubtful whether he ever intended to go on crusade. And here down below is a knight receiving his sword from the king. Now here we have a map of England and Wales at the time of King John. So here is Wales and England. Scotland is up here. So I'll just point out various places. Okay, so Northumberland, Cumberland, Yorkshire, Lancashire. I pointed Wales out already. Lincoln, Nottingham, Derby. This is the County Palatine of Chester, Stafford, Shropshire, Leicester. We have Suffolk, Cambridge, Huntingdon, Northampton, Warwick, Worcester, Hereford, Gloucester, Buckinghamshire, Oxford, Bedford, Hertford, Essex, Middlesex, London, house of resistance to William Longchamp. Longchamp, though able and loyal to his master, was avaricious and autocratic, and soon alienated the influential barons and tenants-in-chief. On his return, John set up his own court, refused to allow royal officials into his shires or honours, and played on the grievances of the baronage. It looked as if a civil war might break out between the Justiciar and the king's brother. However, Richard heard in Sicily of the unsettled political situation in England. He therefore dispatched to England Walter de Coutances, Archbishop of Rouen, who was in fact a Cornishman, with full powers to do whatever he thought fit. Soon afterwards, Richard's and John's half-brother Geoffrey, an illegitimate son of Henry II by the fair Rosamond, also arrived in England to take up his appointment as Archbishop of York. The Archbishop of Canterbury was abroad in attendance on King Richard. Longchamp's agents, who were under the mistaken impression that Geoffrey had come to England without Richard's permission, unwisely dragged Geoffrey from a priory altar and imprisoned him in Dover Castle. Thus, Longchamp offended both the lay and ecclesiastical baronage. Walter de Coutances had intended to mediate between Longchamp and Count John, but now he felt unable to do so because Longchamp had become so unpopular. As it turned out, the arrival of the Archbishop of Rouen did not help John as much as he might have hoped, for it was agreed at an assembly of magnates that Longchamp should be deposed, but that Walter de Coutances should act as chief justicant in his place. John therefore decided, in order to forward his ambitions, to enter into an alliance with King Philip II of France, who had returned from the Third Crusade in 1191. John had good arguments for his behaviour. In the first place, Richard I had set an example by allying with France against his father when he was the King of England. In the second place, Philip was overlord of the Angevins for all their possessions in France, and therefore had an important part to play in the establishment